Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. Currently, 31 states have passed laws requiring picture photo ID or some other kind of identification that's rather difficult for a lot of people to offer up to allow them to vote. The Brennan School did a study that found at least 5 million people could be disenfranchised because of these new regulations. And a new organization has been formed to try to help solve the problem, and it's called Vote Riders. Now joining us to talk about all of this is Kathleen Unger. She's the founder and president of Vote Riders, and that's sort of like Freedom Riders, spelled R-I-D-E-R-S. She's an active attorney. She was a vice president in a past life at Universal Studios. And Ms. Unger's political experience includes co-chairing a congressional campaign, and she's been devoted to election protection issues for at least the last decade. Thanks very much for joining us, Kathleen.
Thank you.
And I should add, just for full transparency, a few years ago, Kathleen worked for a while with the Real News Network. So, Kathleen, tell me, why did you get involved in this? Let me just ask, why did you form Vote Riders? What's it trying to do?
Vote Riders is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is devoted to helping citizens, eligible citizens, get their voter IDs. We formed Vote Riders because while there are governmental entities and campaigns and wonderful organizations that are helping to educate people about what's needed to get their voter IDs, we felt that we needed to take the next step and actually reach out to citizens to help them get their voter IDs.
So if one goes to your website, what I find is you have a campaign where you want people to pledge to, what is it, get at least one or two people actually to a Department of Motor Vehicles in one of these states and actually help them get ID so they can go vote. So do I have it right, and how's that going?
We've just launched the pledge we call it Take a Friend to the DMV. Of course, DMV stands for Department of Motor Vehicles, but it's essentially wherever in your state you would go to get your voter ID. So the idea is to go to voteriders.com/pledge and to sign up to help 3 citizens get their voter IDs. And you'll be hearing back from us about the 31 states and the election protection hotline 866-OUR-VOTE, O-U-R, vote, and other ways that we can assist you in reaching out to people to help get their voter IDs.
Okay, so give some examples of the laws that are being passed and why you think this is going to disenfranchise people.
There is, we are concerned about this. The strictest laws require a government-issued photo ID. And so that means basically the people who are in jeopardy are those who do not have a driver's license in the state in which they live and where they intend to vote. So if that may mean that you have to get a copy of your birth certificate wherever that's from, and frankly, that can take 2.5 months to get. So now's the time to proceed.
And it's not just a driver's license, because DMVs can also issue a state identity card. So it's not like you have to take a driving test in order to vote.
No, forgive me if I made that, if I were confusing in that. No, it's just that that's the location where you would also get your voter ID.
Right. Now let me ask you, so people that support these laws are saying, well, why shouldn't people have to show legitimate ID? The voter fraud's a big issue, and there's all they say that voter fraud is prevalent in many of these states. And so why shouldn't people have to prove they have a right to vote?
We're not, 2 things. First of all, Vote Riders does not deal with the politics or policies in connection with the voter ID laws. We take them as is and are really trying to help citizens meet the requirements of their state's law so that they'll be able to vote when the time comes. And uh, I, we're not saying that there should be no identification. It's just that it's in many states what they are now requiring it's very complicated. It can be very time consuming. It can be pretty expensive. So it's important for us all to reach out and help our fellow citizens to help them get their voter IDs.
So you're trying to be diplomatic and not get in the middle of the debate, but as a factual matter, where are things at with this legally? I mean, is this a violation of the Voting Rights Act of, what is it, 1965? And where are these issues at in the courts?
Well, there is one state's law, Wisconsin, which doesn't have anything to do with the Voting Rights Act, but which is in their law is in the court, and it is currently enjoined. So it's not in force, and it remains to be seen if, when, and to what extent that law will be overturned or upheld. So the Voting Rights Act forbids discrimination on the basis of race and against discrimination against people of color, minorities in the election laws of that state.
And the states you're referring to violated this in the past. That's why they have this special issue. They have to get any changes.
Exactly.
And if I understand correctly now, the Justice Department stepped in and Texas and didn't uphold this ID law, and Texas is now suing the federal government so they can enact this voter ID law.
Correct.
But at the moment, in these 31 states, more or less, these ID laws are in place and are operative,
Yes.
and that's
yes.
why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
Okay, now in your press release, you mentioned that women are 32 million, I think you give the number of women are particularly affected by this. Why is that?
Because women are oftentimes, certainly upon marriage, many women change their names. So they may not realize that in the past, while they've been able to vote without a problem, if the name on the voter rolls is different from what the name is on their driver's license or whatever is allowed as a voter ID under their state's law, these women may not be able to vote. It applies to people who have changed. Anybody's ever changed their name, frankly, from the date of birth, okay, from their birth certificate, which parenthetically is also a problem because there are a lot of people who do not have a copy and cannot get a copy of a birth certificate. Until relatively recently, African Americans born in the South did not have a birth certificate. They just didn't issue one. Or people had a birth certificate that was in a building that burned down or, was stolen from them in their purse. In any event, but women are disproportionately impacted because of name change.
Right. Well, the majority, if not, I think all 31 states have Republican governors. And I guess the idea here is that poor are less likely to be able to navigate all the problems of getting this ID. And the allegation, at least, is that Republicans don't think they're going to get a lot of votes out of the poor. But I have to say, I don't think the Democrats have been very, very strong or putting anywhere that much effort into registering people for voting either. I know the poor generally will vote more for the Democrats, but it's always boggled my mind, or maybe not, because it's not like this last administration of President Obama has been that great for the poor anyway. Maybe they're not, maybe neither party's really all that interested in whether the poor vote or not. But I know you're trying to be diplomatic and you don't want to get into this kind of piece of the discussion. So let's just get back to, I'll do the editorializing. You can talk about getting people to the DMV. So just finally, what do you think people should be doing about this?
Okay, well, first of all, if I could just clarify, there are basically 5 groups of people who are most vulnerable. older Americans. Older Americans many do not drive, don't have a driver's license. Uh, People of color, young adults oftentimes don't have a driver's license, or they're going to college in another state, so they wouldn't have a driver's license in that state. People with disabilities, as well as people with low income. So our pledge to take a friend to the DMV is, again, voteriders.com/pledge. Please, this is reach out to your grandmother, your sister who's going to college in another state, your neighbor who has disabilities, who could be a returning veteran from Afghanistan, your best friend, and indeed it could be yourself, who needs to get a voter ID, and who it's important to reach out. There are organizations on the ground that are helping, and we want to help you get your voter ID
Okay.
and to help others.
All right, thanks for joining us, Kathleen.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network. And don't forget, over here or somewhere up there, there's going to be a donate button, because if you don't click on that, we can't do this. Thanks for joining us.